Hey everyone, James here from TDB, bringing you another episode. Today, going to be drinking a ripe cake that I'm just finishing up, the Bawang. And I actually bought this cake, I originally bought the 2019 cake back in, I believe, 2019. And I bought this 2021 cake in 2021, so this is a repeat blend from Scott. And so I was, I was a fan of the original production, and so I wanted to check out this tea, and I have been pretty satisfied so far. And I think this is a good tea to sort of understand blending and how it can, make something that's a bunch of small parts together greater than the sum of its parts too. Because there's some characteristics in this tea that I really don't care for if it's if it composes like the majority of the tea, specifically the bitter component to this, but I do like those characteristics if instead of like being the dominating flavor profile of the tea, it's one of the secondary flavors. So instead of being like 80% of the tea, it's like 15 or 20% of the tea. And so I think that really does get represented well in this cake. I think it's a very easy tea to drink, but I think the flavor profile is quite interesting too. So, as is the case for just about every ripe I have, I've been brewing it fairly casually in this big blue pot. This is probably the 5th or 6th steep I'm having, and so cheers, guys. So the first thing I taste in this tea is this bitterness to it. And the bitterness does really remind me of kind of that Lao Man bitterness to it. But rather than being kind of like that is everything that you taste, it becomes kind of like this kind of like sugary, maybe a little more generic ripe sweetness to it too. And so those contrasting flavors of the bitter and the sweet really kind of accentuate each other, and so it's really quite pleasant. I think in the way that they go together in that way, and it's something that I don't detect a lot of in ripe. In fact, I really only started to feel like that really bitter material showing up in ripe maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So, and it's not something that I've really detected to the same level in kind of factory tea production. So for me, at least, this tea definitely checks off kind of like a unique flavor profile box to it as well. Okay, so I'm gonna let that hang out for a little bit there. As you saw, I just freshly reboiled that water. Decent thickness, still pretty soft. This is a tea that you could certainly drink now. It might also be a tea that will change in the future. It's really hard for me to say what's going to happen with that bitterness, if eventually it will go away, or if this is kind of that nature that it's just kind of permanently in the tea. Either way, I don't particularly mind because, again, it's a secondary flavor to kind of the other parts that happen in this tea. Texture-wise, I'd say this is pretty standard as far as ripe goes. Good smoothness, decent body to it as well. Fairly soft and smooth going down, so it's not one tea that's like rough or anything like that. And I would definitely say I do, of the couple ripe cakes I bought from YS recently, I'd say this one's definitely a favorite. I do like it more than the Demon Hawks cake. That's the other one I featured fairly recently. And I think a lot of that is just kind of the interesting complexity and stuff with the tea and how the bitterness integrates specifically. Scott did release a little bit more information on this blend for this year. He said it comes from 5 different villages, and those villages are all across Yunnan. So I saw that Linsong, Samao, and Munghai were mentioned. I do feel like that kind of bitter profile is most associated with Bulong and some of the areas around it. So like La Mane, I believe, is within Bulong. So kind of those places. So that's where I would probably initially guess that profile comes from. But who can know for sure? I certainly don't. Cheers. Let that cool down for just a little bit. Pretty generic ripe smell. I can't say that you're going to smell that like really pungent sharpness coming off of it. But that bitterness does linger just a little bit, not in a bad way per se, but in a way that kind of contrasts again with sort of the sweetness that you would expect from sort of your standard ripe. So yeah, I'd say pretty similar, steep to there too. Another thing I'm going to note too is sometimes when I'm doing these episodes, especially with these ripes, and I'm going on to steep 6 or 7, I'm going to notice on those steeps, I'm like, ooh, this tea is really starting to run out of steam. I think especially this is quite common with maybe some factory teas, so Shagwan, Manghai. And that's not really a huge issue as long as you're kind of aware of it and you're not expecting to get a ton of steeps out of it. But, it's always nice to get a little bit more out of your tea. And I can tell that this is a tea that is giving out plenty of flavor still and could probably be pushed for easily a few more steeps too. So in that sense, that this tea also gets a thumbs up here. And, the last thing on my list is to sort of compare this with the 2019. And that's kind of a challenging task because, I finished the 2019. It's been a while since I had it. They'd also be different ages. My natural impulse or instinct would say that I like this tea very, very slightly less than that tea. That being said, I think this is very much a solid, well above average ripe. It costs $40.50 for a 250 gram cake right now. Scott does raise his prices around this time, so that price might be higher in a bit, but I think that's a very reasonable price to pay for something that's, pretty decent. Clearly has some nice material in it, and I think it does really showcase blends, and blends is something that I'm always a fan of, and I think when it comes to ripe especially, blends are pretty good. You can certainly have some interesting tea that are more single origin, but I think blending as a rule is something that you're going to, it creates more of a assurance in terms of like aging and making sure the profile doesn't get too simple and that sort of thing. So absolutely a recommendation from my end. Let me know if you've tried this tea. Let me know what your other favorite productions are from Yunnan Sourcing. And thanks for tuning in. Give it the thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already and you want to hear more. We have a ton of videos coming out all the time. And I will see you all next time. Cheers.